also emailed us public comment that will be attached to the minutes to this meeting. The Board of Selectmen called this public hearing on November 8th in order to discuss the proposed removal of trees in the public right-of-way on River Road and Mill Road. These were trees identified by Eversource as potential hazards to their electrical infrastructure in the area. And initially there was about 80 trees identified or requested for removal. The town tree warden reviewed each of these as potential hazards and then culled the list significantly down to approximately, I think, 20 trees, some that were actually dead and diseased, 22, and then some that were just deemed a hazard to the utility lines. All these trees were marked by, I think, November 9th and posted for removal for purposes of this hearing. Residents in the area were actually sent a Everbridge blast by the town, just notifying them of the public hearing, and then this was published in the paper and everything, so everybody would be aware of it, and put in my comments by bi-weekly update. But I know this tree removal plan is really much broader than those identified on just town property, and includes an additional 200 or so trees on private property. So for the public's benefit, we wanted to re-invite Eversource to come back to us to give a presentation they gave to the Board of Selectmen on November 9th that just talks about why they're doing this and what the purpose of this is, to give some background. And there are members who are here tonight can also answer additional questions, but I do want to remind people that the intention of this hearing is really an obligation that the town has for trees on town property. Decisions for tree removal on private property is a private matter between Eversource and the property owner. So with that, I thought we could invite up, we have several members here. We have, why don't you introduce yourselves, and then we have a presentation that could be shared. This presentation was also given at the Board of Selectmen meeting. So that, go ahead, yep. Maybe introduce your team. I know you have several members here.
Well, hi, my name is Dale McLeod. I'm the area arborist for Madison Area Work Center for Eversource. I'm here with Stan Arkeliak, my supervisor, vegetation management for Eversource. Also Robin Kaepernick, who's with public relations for Eversource, is joining us tonight. So I can share my screen, and we can go ahead and go through it.
Yeah, you can go ahead and share that, and then everybody at home will be able to see it. And I see one of our board member, oh, Bruce, you're here now. Great. Welcome. And also Noreen Cocarota is joining us remotely tonight, so she's a part of the hearing as well.
Okay. Well, thank you for joining us here this evening. We're here to review our Eversource project, tackling to address worst performing devices throughout the state of Connecticut. These are segments of our utility grid that in the past have been impacted by significant tree damage, and it is our goal to remove hazards in order to remove potential hazards in the future and lessen tree-related damages during storm events. So this segment is primarily in Madison along Mill Street, River Road, also goes up into Clinton for small ways, but it encompasses about 1.5 miles of road and lines. In this segment, this is the potential affecting just over 300,000 customers if and when this line is interrupted. Over the past 3 years, we've got 302,000 customers affected with just over 12.4 million minutes of outage time during these events. It's about 1.5 miles in length. We've got 3 of these major events in the last 3 years. So that kind of goes through why this particular part of Mill Road and River Road is being targeted for work. And here we have a rundown of 14 trees that have been posted by the Town of Madison Tree Warden. We've requested removal to help with this program.
So on this list, you'll see 12 trees, but during the walk, we added an additional 2 to the posting list, and those are not included in this list.
Okay, so this is a different presentation than what the Board of Selectmen had, a much lengthier one.
Yeah, so this
Okay.
is just cut down specifically saying this is what the project is. These are the trees that were
Okay.
posted, a tree ordered for public comment.
And I think that the lengthier presentation is, can we get that available for people though? Because I think it had a lot of helpful information. I know you've given it like at CCM and things like
Yeah,
that.
we
So
can-
on
we
the
can
program, because I think some people had asked for that. So if you could send that to us, we'll put that on the website.
Of course.
So this is just addressing the specific in terms of the posted town trees.
Correct.
And so Craig Taylor is our tree warden. And so maybe, Craig, if you could just spend a minute talking through the process that you went through and, you know, walking through with the Eversource folks and how you came up with your list.
Yeah, so I went through with an arborist we use in town and addressed about the 80 or so trees that are in the town right away. Determine which ones that can be trimmed, which ones that can be deemed hazards at this time for removal. And these 12 plus 2 more that are posted that are diseased and should be removed at some time before they do become a hazard. I honestly walked the whole location probably 3 times. It's good to get out and walk. Walked with both Eversource and our arborist, and we're confident in our decision with these trees being posted, the ones up for removal and the ones that will be staying and being good for trimming.
Great. And I thought maybe if we're gonna open up to questions and comments, I would like to prioritize at least what the topic of this hearing is, which is the ones in the town right away first. If people have specific questions or issues with those, and then I know a number of people just wanted to make some general comments on the program itself, because it affects obviously a wider part of the neighborhood. And so with that, I guess, if the board is good with that, should we just take some questions from the public? So if we could at least, if you could, let's do in the room first, and raise your hand if you have a specific comment or question relating to the town trees that are part of this public hearing. And then we can answer your questions or put your comment into the public record. Yeah. So this is just the actual. Oh, you got that? You got that? And then here's some extras. If the members of the public want to take those. So we're in the room here specifically to address the town trees. If you wouldn't mind standing up and just stating your name and address, and then provide us with your feedback.
Right, my name is Jerry Aubrey, and I live at 22 Kingsbridge Way, and I'm here for a couple of trees. We live in the Strathmore Farms development, and the power lines are, we're I don't know, several hundred yards back from the road, and all the power lines are underground in our complex. So I don't follow why my address is up there, and are there trees around my house?
So it's just a basic address we use for the whole property is Kingsbridge Way. There's trees that are on the town right of way, which is the road side of the stone wall. And those are ones we posted and we'll be removing because they were deemed at some point could possibly be a potential to drop into the power lines. So, and they are diseased, so therefore we're gonna move forward.
It's not number 22, it's just.
Okay,
it's just
it's Kingsbridge as one, it's not your address in
Okay.
particular. No.
And
We did not go onto the property of Kingsbridge, this is all in the stone wall up to the road.
And there's a separate notice, because Everbridge tagged some trees, but we actually have posted notice on ones that the town, that are in the town right of way. So they have a separate notice posted.
Okay, and my question is, looking at the map, it kind of covers the whole length of Mill and River. What is the town right of way versus what's private property?
Okay, so that's kind of a loaded question, but it changes as it goes. What I do is I go out with an iPad and it has a GIS, which is a global positioning, and it gives me where the town line is and where the property owner line begins. So I have a basic where I can measure off the center line to that property. There are certain sections on that road where it's only 8 feet in, and there are certain sections where it's 30 feet in. So it varies by how property line, were deemed back in, way back when, so.
Yeah, and it's always off the center line, so I think some people think it's from the roadside in, it's not, it's from the center line. And then, as he said, it varies all over, there's no common, standard, really. It's just.
Okay, so I mean, it's not from, that's pretty tight to the
So,
road.
so I can tell you, for instance, on the Kingsbridge property, it's pretty much from that center line to that stone wall is 100% correct of where it's running. Very rare that happens, but it actually happens on the Reddick's property too, that it's actually runs along that stone wall.
The line.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yes? And we'll try to keep comments to 2 minutes too, just because I know we have a lot of people in this, so, but go ahead.
I'm Jen Stewart, I live in the Kingsbridge area. I'm just not clear how many trees will be removed from the Kingsbridge area.
Well, you're
So
talking about
there's-
town trees?
Yeah,
or
town
only-
trees.
Town trees.
I think three. So I think 2 posted and 1 that is quite damaged and could be a hazard. So I think 3 total along that, on the stone wall, and the stone wall on the road.
Okay, thank you.
So Craig, it's more than what's listed here.
No, so posted trees, which are ones that are diseased at this time, could potentially be a hazard in the future. And then the one that's up for removal is one that has been deemed a hazard at this time.
Public,
It's
a
been
public,
taken down.
a public
hazard.
hearing is not required on a public hazard and
Yeah.
public hazard, so these are ones that are potential hazards.
Yes.
Hi, Fran Brady, 108 Genesee. Quick question, it seems pretty obvious. Is anyone going to replace anything? The trees that you take down, you could put anything in its place. I know it's in the right of way, but could you put a bush or something else there?
I mean, I'm sure Eversource would be.
Is that Eversource, that's part of your
That's part of
replacement,
the, it's part of the resilience projects.
even on town property then? Okay, great. I'll have questions later on too.
Yeah, and I think no decisions on town property have been made what's gonna go in yet. That's something that we'll work through. They have a list of what they're providing.
Like
that
you
we
said,
can have
bush or something
Okay,
like
well
that.
then,
Yeah.
I wanted to bring up a point there then. Their list of 30 trees, and I guess there's another page of bushes and things. The 30 trees, there's only 8 native trees, and so if you're, trees are good, any kind of tree you put in there would be good, most of them. But if you could, like to go with the native trees, their list only has 8. So we'd be glad to help you with, we're mapping trees. We provide native trees to the town, provide advice to the residents as well.
One other,
Barbara Yeager, 205 River Road. One thing I'd like to encourage is the town to plant the trees along the road rather than moving to another part of town. It's my understanding that there's been talk of taking trees down on River Road and planting the trees that Eversource gives the town somewhere else. I would not encourage that.
I don't know where you read that from,
And my next question is, we've never had a problem with power. I mean, it's gone down for 3 or 4 hours now and then, and there are parts of town that has gone out for weeks and weeks. So is the town going to go assess trees in the town right away along those neighborhoods and deal with that? Or is this just because Eversource is clearing the trees on our street?
We typically wait for, we usually get a lot of emails that come in regarding that, and then we go check it out. Obviously, we're on a limited budget. There are many trees in this town.
Eversource isn't, so maybe they can help you out with that.
That's not my decision.
Okay, maybe we can go to online questions, just first related to the town right away, and then we can take other public comments. Does anybody, please raise your hand if you want to make a public comment specifically to the town right-of-way trees? Any hands raised?
I don't see any hands raised, Peggy.
Okay, all right. Right, well, I guess now I know a number of people are just concerned generally with the project, so I guess we can open it up. If you can keep your marks to 2 minutes, we'll start in the room again, I feel like we're the rector. So maybe if you want to raise your hand and make a public comment generally about the tree removal plan that Eversource is currently undertaking in the neighborhood, please raise your hand.
I'm Cynthia Horn. I live also at Strathmore Farms. I think that there's a difficult email. Eversource presents these figures about, so many million minutes lost to power outages. But to go to Barbara's point, I mean, the numbers don't mean anything unless you compare them to something else. So, I've been at Strathmore since 2013. We had 3 outages. They haven't been long. And I don't know if they're long enough to justify, in general, the street cutting. How does Eversource choose Madison, Mill Road, River Road versus some other road? I'm not saying that some other place should be cut down. But I think the numbers are they're not very clear because there's no comparisons. And I'd say that is, to me, a problem with decision-making process and how to, why Mill Road, River Road? Because there's a lot of nice trees and a lot of them are gonna come down and you have no control over that. But the basis of the decision and the data that Eversource gives on its own is not very clear to me.
And that, I know that part of the presentation that we had seen, and I think there was a slide here, it talked about that road in that area is attached to a broader, they call it backbone.
I listened to that.
So, yeah, so it does impact other areas outside of Madison in terms of any damage that happens to that. I don't know if you want to spend a minute talking about the process. This was after a year of technical analysis, from what I understand, right, that your people did?
Yeah.
Yes.
So sure, so the public hearing is specifically about the town trees, but just going into that for a second, we used 3 years worth of outage data from the entire state. We targeted specific devices that had the most amount of total timeout. So you are correct, when you look at 3,000 customers and 12.4 million minutes, it seems like it's very broad numbers and it's hard to actually put that into reality. But that's 3 days worth of outages per customer that was out.
Okay, so how does that compare though to some other place in Madison? I mean, is it worse than, I don't know, Route 79 or something like that? We always hear about North Madison having all these outages and we haven't had outages.
So,
That's one of the things that's surprising about this to people who live there.
and I can understand that. And what I'll say to that is that we do have about 40,000 devices across the state.
Right.
And this made the top 50 as far as outages over the last 3 years.
And
So
again,
I
to the
can't
point
compare
that it's not necessarily that neighborhood. It's the circuit, it's the
I
line
understand that.
that comes out of the substation and feeds it. So you fortunately haven't been impacted probably because of the underground component. But the average number of customers fed off of that circuit, that's how they arrive at that number.
So are there any other areas in Madison that, I'll stop actually, that are up in the top 50? I mean, how many other places in Madison can expect to deal with this issue of tree cutting?
Not this year, but moving forward, there are more projects that will be coming. To be honest, I don't have the figures in front of me, so that's something I can get back to you on.
I'm just interested.
Okay, any other, oh yeah, Brent.
Right. I got a couple phone calls when this all was going on, those macro trees. This situation almost slipped through the cracks, I got the impression from some people. If it wasn't one, as far as I understand, if it wasn't for one persistent neighbor knocking on doors or asking questions, some of this might have slipped through and we wouldn't be here having a meeting. I might be wrong, but this is the perception I had, 3 weeks ago. And Craig, as I understand, and I know Bob Cookta, the guy that had your job before, is Craig does he have enough resources? Do you have enough resources to handle these kind of things that pop up, given that you have multiple job responsibilities and beach and rec and trees and I don't know what else? I understand you have a lot under your hat there, compared to where it was before you took over. So my question for the town is he resourced properly to handle the next issue that comes up regarding trees?
Yes, I think
Well, I think actually he's got a much sizable budget than was a couple of years ago. I think Lauren can talk to the fact that the town has added.
Yeah, the budget was $25,000 prior
years.
to, for years, we had a $25,000 budget total for the whole fiscal year. And we have an $85,000 budget now. So we did, I think that was in the 17-18 fiscal year, we did increase that line item because we knew that there were so many aging, dying trees in town. And the request that came in to remove trees on town property is insane.
It's dozens, I mean, to be honest, I know many here are concerned about the removal. 99% of the calls we get, and then we get probably a dozen a week, are for trees to get removed. It's complaints about trees. So the volume of calls is enormous. Should we have more money in the tree budget? Probably, but I
was
think.
thinking more, not money, but people.
Well, I mean, that's another guy, but he's not actually taking the trees down. He's going around and evaluating, the health of the trees and making decisions and then pulling in. We actually have a paid arborist contract, and that's with Charlie Island, who he walked through and looked at this situation. In terms of this situation and how it didn't fall through the cracks because they had not come back to us yet with their proposal. So it got brought to my attention because of the neighbor, but eventually it was going to be brought to my attention that she was just probably 2 weeks ahead of when Eversource was going to be coming to me with the list of town trees. So in that sense, but we've had discussions with Eversource from a communication standpoint. I think that they should not have gone out and started knocking on doors before coming to the town and letting us know that it was going to be as extensive as it is, and I agree with that. I mean, we weren't aware that they had actually posted and were contacting homeowners. So that was a communication issue, and I think going forward, they understood now that, that needs to be done differently, because that caught us surprised, because Barbara was seeing all this and came to my office, and in the meantime, we didn't even have the list of the trees or the town trees. So yes, I think there can be better communication in these types of programs going forward, and we talked about that. In terms of resources, once again, though, I think it's worth discussion, but I think the resources are more about more tree removal, and that's where, the ability to have some of these handled by Eversource because of the vegetation management program does save taxpayer money, but clearly we're also supportive of preserving trees. And so I know one of the comments, Barbara, you made earlier about this giving the trees to other parts of town. What we've asked Eversource to do is do a 3-for-1 match, 1-to-1 for the homeowner, but 2 to the town or to Mad for Trees, so that we can find other locations in town that would be more suitable. But the 1-for-1 would still go to the property owner.
Of the town tree?
And of the town trees. We're gonna review what's being proposed, but the intention would be to replant in the locations that they're removed. There's no plans otherwise, but what I was hoping to do was to support the Mad for Trees effort. And we have a lot of ideas. We were just talking about some more today with our beach and rec director and other locations that would be great. So those extra 2 trees can go to a location that's not gonna be a hazard, that's also gonna be something beneficial to the town.
Yeah, I just want to be clear, I'm not here just to preserve trees, I'm here to ask the question, is there enough man hours dedicated to doing that job, which requires going out and looking at a diseased tree? I don't care how much money you have, if you have enough time, and please, could you answer? Do you feel you have enough time to do the job, which has gotten worse?
Yes, and I have a great crew that works for me.
Right, good, we got it.
Yes.
It's on record, thank you.
They take direction very well too.
Well, and I will also comment that I think the reality is any member of town staff could always use more help, right? That's just a reality, unfortunately. I'm hoping, that it is something we have to look at. I think if anything, the ability to outsource because I think the town actually used to do some of the removal itself and dealing with the stump grinding and all that other stuff, and that was a big burden. So that we tend to outsource some of that now. So I'm sorry, more public comment. I'm taking over the public hearing.
We also
So this is a-
have a chat.
Okay, I thought, well, let's finish in this room and then we'll go to the online comment. So,
Jerry Aubrey from Kingsbridge Way again. Question quick on the statistics. Were those outages the past 3 years, were those all tree related?
Yes.
Okay. And on the general program, our concern is the concept of clear cutting 100 feet either side of the road. I mean, that stretch on Post Road, just across the line in Clinton. I mean, that is ugly as hell. And if that's a deal you struck with that property owner, well, then I guess that's the deal. But I would ask, as a ratepayer and a resident of the neighborhood, there be some consideration that, it's a risk, versus maintaining the environment. Obviously, if you cut everything down, you don't have to worry about it for 100 years. But I don't think that's what we're paying for in our rates. And you treat our street like you would treat your street. You wouldn't clear cut your own street. I'd like to feel good at the end of this that the appropriate balance was struck. We lost power for, I don't know, like 9 days or something. We lived in Stamford when Sandy hit. So I'm on board with what you guys have been doing the past 10 years, but there's got to be a balance between preserving the environment and preserving the resiliency of the grid.
Appreciate the comment.
All right, and I know, okay, because I know there's people online as well. So why don't, let me go online first and then we'll go back to more in this room. So online, my public comment.
So Amy Thomas, trees should be removed, or at least, or as a last resort, not as a general policy. The cumulative known damage of removing trees, just soil erosion, habitat loss, loss of shade, and carbon suppression, etc., is greater than the potential of trees taking down power lines.
Yeah,
bigger.
okay. All right, thank you for your comment. And also if they're typed into the chat, they'll be added to the minutes as well. She saves the written. Any other hands raised online?
No.
If people want to make any public comment?
Oh, wait, yes.
Hi, my name's Deb King. I live at 49 Cottage Road. I just have a question about the cost of, it sounds like you're removing about 250 trees. What is the budget for that? Eversource, this is for Eversource.
So this meeting is specifically about the rural and town trees, the tree warden posted, but not about the budget itself. That's something we may not want.
Oh, sorry, I thought we were in the private tree section. I just was.
No, we are, they're saying though that they prefer not to answer that in this public hearing, but I think if you email the, what is it, trees@eversource.com, they can get back to you a response in writing of your request.
Okay, because I just, we have trees taken down on our property at Seabreeze. And, it's often $2,000 for a tree. That's, maybe a bigger tree than some of these that are coming down. And that's not to blind and stump it. So if you're taking down 250 trees times 2,000 a tree, that's a lot of money that it's $500,000 that the ratepayers are paying to have mostly trees removed on private property. So I guess one question is, under what authority do you operate to have ratepayers pay for private tree removal?
I mean, I think this is, they're regulated by PURA, which is a state agency. It's a fair question, and I think, that PURA obviously has been working with Eversource a lot, and, to minimize outages, and this is one of the strategies that Eversource has come up with to deal with the outage issues that they've had. But I think if anything, maybe if you could put your email in the chat, somebody from Eversource could just respond to you, because I think there's gonna be a lot of people in town questioning this, about the amount of money spending to this and the value of it and the trade-offs, so.
What's the value for the town part of it then? Just multiply it. Can they address the cost
Yeah.
to take the town trees down, 20 trees, and then we'll multiply it right there.
Well, I'm not gonna respond for you, but obviously they have probably a very large contract that covers the entire state, I'm guessing, right? So there's, this is a volume game that, makes it more cost, available to them than if we as a homeowner or even we as the town were actually to hire somebody. We're one of, how many are in this, 20 towns, 15 or 20 towns?
For this work area is 11.
Excuse me?
11, covering the Madison works.
No, I'm saying in this program, the pilot program that you were doing this year with the removal, the tree removal, there are 20 other towns, 22 towns impacted by this. So, we're not the only town. And I think there's probably gonna be a lot more feedback after this program kind of has occurred this year and how things might be managed differently in the future.
And it was pretty much a pilot program that Pura did approve, and they had come at us a couple of years ago and asked us to work outside the confines of our normal cycle tree trimming. So this was one of the things that, thank goodness for data, right? Because it helped us to pinpoint on the areas that really would benefit by something more robust like this. So again, it's pretty much a pilot program for 2 years, I believe, gentlemen, right? And
So it's not really a pilot, it's part of the enhanced tree removal program,
which is,
just
but
expand.
they're evaluating it after each section of towns is gone through, so to speak. And it was all approved by Pura. There was a point at which they asked us to pause, and they looked at the data with fresh eyes and said, no, please continue. So it's been under their review.
So that hopefully gives a little background to the origins of the program. You have a question?
I do,
Yeah,
actually.
okay, yeah.
So we've talked about pilot and we've talked about data and evaluation. And so can you speak a little bit to the measures after the fact? So you're gonna come in, you're gonna cut down some trees. I expect that there'll be some homeowners that say, no, I'm not giving you permission to cut down that tree you identified. After you've moved through the area, are you gonna then come back and measure the outages in the same way that you did and measure the effectiveness of this program, right? Your working hypothesis is if we proactively go out and pull down the diseased trees, which is a no-brainer, and some other strategic trees, that our service levels will increase. Do you have a format for measuring that, accumulating that data, and then bringing it back to us as a community, how effective this program was? And even maybe to the level of, that tree that we identified that the homeowner said no, it came down and it caused X number of minutes or hours of outage. I think as we move through the rest of the town, as you move through the rest of the state, coming back to the community and bringing back to us that good faith data would help us believe on the outset that your hypothesis is valid, right? So we don't live and breathe this the way you do. The more information you can share with us, I think, better informed we will be, and the quicker we will be to support the efforts.
Since this is a pilot program, I'd like to request that our neighborhood not be cut down. My understanding is that tree cutting is going to start like right after this meeting. I'd like to request that be postponed so there can be a broader engagement with the neighborhood, because it's not going to help us if after collecting data for a year or two, you say, well, actually we cut down too many trees on River Road and Mill Road 2 years ago. Sorry, folks.
I missed calling it a pilot program, but yeah, I understand what you're saying.
Yeah.
Tan, what to your point, yes.
So,
Okay.
Sean and Rennie might be better suited to speak to that question as far as reporting the data, but it is something that we would be reviewing going forward.
So there's a couple more hands raised online. Let's open it up for public comment for online again. Jacqueline, are you gonna?
Yep, I just unmuted Alex and then I'll go to Paula and then I'll go back to Deb. So Alex, go ahead.
Hi there. Have you guys considered running the utility backbone up the connector just west of River Road and Mill Road and just servicing the local homes on that 1.5 mile stretch, rather than running a backbone up a county, a rustic tree lined street, when you have this major connector right west of it where you could actually bury the line and pretty much meet at the same spot. Like, essentially, why are we running lines up this tiny little tree lined street when you have this connector with all that space that could be buried, or just run the lines there?
So as I mentioned, this meeting is primarily about the town trees, never posted by the tree warden. I, in vegetation management, cannot speak to the engineering portion of this. That'd be better suited to another department.
I mean, I will say that we've asked the similar questions on the previous meetings, and we did talk a lot about the nature of expense to bury lines, and that was cost prohibitive, significantly cost prohibitive, and that was with some of the staff of Eversource. We did a walkthrough, and I know Barbara was present with that, our town planner, and the chair of the Conservation Commission as well. So we did a walkthrough of the property. We talked a lot about what are the other options, and it was just, I think, just with our simple little downtown project of trying to bury power lines, we know that there's a lot of complexity to that, and so we were told there was no way to do it cost effectively. So that was the response we received.
So I'm sorry. I can appreciate that as far as a town cost goes, but isn't this really an Eversource issue where they run the lines? Like, why would we be responsible for running lines for a quasi-governmental?
No, it was,
utility?
I'm not saying, I'm saying Eversource said it was cost prohibitive. I mean, I think it's like $1 million a mile or something at least to even contemplate. I can't remember.
So generally it's about $5 to $8 million.
$5 to $8 million per mile. Okay, and there was some statistic that I was thrown that seemed quite substantial. So, and I will say that, I think all of us would love to have the power lines buried, but it was just going to be ridiculously expensive for them to even consider this. And that's going to be a cost trade-off that Eversource faces across the entire state of Connecticut. It's far cheaper and more economical to cut down trees than it will be to bury the power lines. It's just the nature of living in a state where we were some of the early adopters to electricity. So these lines are ancient, unfortunately, in our town. So another public comment, please, I see several hands raised. Thank you for your comment, Alex.
I'm gonna unmute Paula Steer.
Okay, Paula, are you on?
Hi, am I unmuted?
You're good.
Yes.
Okay, hi. I live right off of River Road, and just as the big overview for the last 17 years being there, that area is always one of the first to come right back online. Whereas if there are problems, Eversource goes right to that area, which I know that it's a main feed, but the problem is the 4 or 5 other trees down north of that area, past the campus in the neighborhoods, that is really the rate limiter for getting electricity back. It doesn't seem to be this 1.5 mile in reality. There aren't a lot of trees that are down across the roads during storms. There are some, but it gets addressed, and to cut all these healthy trees, and some of them are in backyards, to me it feels like it's very excessive for the probability to change the character of the street. I am a taxpayer, ratepayer, that in January everyone's going to be talking about the price in cost in general, because our electricity is going to double in price. So I think we should be looking at safety, but also judiciously. This program was probably looked at prior to the economic situation that we're in right now. But the healthy trees, the trees that are in the backyards, for an area that electricity gets turned on pretty fast, doesn't seem to be a good rationale in my mind. I just wanted to have that for an opinion of a neighbor that looks at all of the trees, and there now it's just a little orange 1-inch square that's on the trees, which is very hard to see. So I was wondering why it's been reduced to just a little tag as well.
Thank you for your comment. I think maybe just explain how you tag the trees, and then in terms of, I guess a question that I think she's asking is that based on your experience now through this program, because you are going deeper into properties, do you think there'll be any kind of rethinking?
As far as how we tag trees?
Well, but also just in terms of the nature and scope of the project.
I mean, there may be. I would be prepared to comment on that at this time. As far as tagging trees go, that's, at least since I've been working for Eversource, it's kind of been how we tag trees. It's usually a 1 to 2 inch tag stapled onto the front or onto the back.
Okay, next is, next is Deb King, and then there's one comment in the chat.
Okay, great, all right.
Hi, I just had a follow-up question. What is the process for removing trees that are in a flood zone and within wetland review area?
So this would be a question better posed to Sean Redding, who's on the call as well.
Oh, okay. Okay, Sean?
Good evening, can you hear me?
Yeah.
So there's no restriction from removing trees in any of those zones. We take proper care to not overturn the soil. But that would be locations where we would not look to do subsurface stump grinding if agreed upon and appropriate. So it would be all above surface work.
Agreed upon. Okay. So just so I understand though that I think in terms of the list of trees that you've targeted, are there many in a wetland? The town trees, nothing is in the wetlands, right? So you're not aware of any on your list that's in a wetland, a designated wetland area?
My neighbor, yeah. And the corner of River Road and Cottage, or was that no? No. Where the pond is?
That we've seen as a designated wetland.
Pardon me?
So as far as like a town designated wetland or a state designated wetland?
Yeah, Army Corps of Engineers.
I've seen. So there is not.
Yeah. Okay. Well, maybe if you have specific trees, you can email those that you want to question the status of those, and if they're in some area that you feel is within a wetland, then you would, they can review that, and we would review that.
Yeah, there's approximately 35 or more trees tagged at 35 Cottage Road, which is in both a flood zone and a wetland review area.
I mean, we can double check with our town planner. I know that when she went through this, she didn't see anything that needed to go through inland wetlands, but I could double check with her.
But they don't have to, right? That was Sean was saying, they don't have to go through inland wetlands, they can just.
So Sean was responding to the AE floodplains from FEMA, not specifically to the wetlands.
I thought Deborah asked about wetlands too.
Well, we'll certainly double check that, but my understanding there was not any issue, at least when the question, because I know you had raised that question and you spoke to our town planner. I think you were with her on that walk.
Yeah, I have an intermittent waterway between my property and my neighbors.
So we'll double check that. Well, no, the question is the tree located in, where it would have to go through some other process, I guess. But also, if I recall, I don't want to paraphrase her, so we'll get these questions answered. She had mentioned that there's different regulations because of peer regulator that you go through, and you these matters, so. But we'll look into it. If there's specific, I think send an email to us, and if you have specific addresses and trees that you've identified you're concerned about, we'll just double check and make sure that there's no other regulatory bodies that's supposed to be reviewing that. And there was one more in the chat.
Using healthy trees is negative to quality of life, and I agree with the questioner that our Eversource fees should not be used to cut trees on private land. That cost should be covered by the landowner. That's from Barbara Darrow. Now we have another one from Alex. Follow up, as I'm not sure why my comment / question was understood correctly, seeing as setting aside whether they are preferred or not. Why are we not pushing Eversource to use the connect to the main line backbone, move it off River Road?
So I guess he was not just questioning putting it underground, but also actually just even the overhead lines, I guess, move. I mean, that, I can't comment on that. That's something Eversource, maybe if you could respond to him, was that contemplated or?
So, same thing applies, if he could email me at Tree CT at Eversource, I'd be
Okay.
happy to get him connected to somebody within engineering that can give him an answer for that.
Okay. treesct.org?
Tree CT at Eversource.
Okay, Jacqueline, can you put that in the chat for everybody? I know that was on our website, actually. It's on the website.
I'll do that now.
Okay, but then, so there's that email for questions.
I don't want
Yeah.
to go ahead. I have an observation to make. Like many of you here tonight, I love trees. I moved to Madison partly because of the trees. My son attended the Yale School of Forestry. I think we all understand, we're trying to find the balance here between the safety and security with which the power network provides us and the trade-off versus the beauty and ambiance of our town. I've been in office a long time, and I'm thinking back to a public hearing that took place the better part of 2 decades ago, right after a major storm, in which much of the town was without power for the better part of a week or even more. And the citizenry turned out probably about 5 times the number of people that are here tonight. And the citizens were very, very angry and were lambasting Eversource for not having taken more preventative measures, knowing that when wind gets into the trees come down. And so I think we're all struggling to find the right balance here. And I think this has been a very useful conversation tonight. There's no single right answer. I think we all recognize that. I've appreciated what's happened here tonight, and I hope that private landowners are able to reach their own informed decision. And I guess we, the selectmen, have to deal with the town trees.
Thank you, Alan.
Thank you.
That's a great summation, because I think we all feel the same way. And I think when I first learned about this and was kind of shocked, actually, as I drove down River Road, and this was, of course, peak foliage time. So it was the most dramatic effect you can have to see the amount of trees that I thought were going to be impacted, and that's where we wanted to make sure that homeowners had the correct information when they're making these kinds of decisions. So one of the things we were trying to promote was actually having homeowners who were thinking about doing this get, and to Barbara's credit, a better assessment of the situation, because you kind of had somebody coming in that maybe didn't have the level of expertise to provide that type of advice. And so Eversource does have an arborist on call a professional arborist that can go out and actually do an assessment of your tree. So if you are one of those residents that had approved or was struggling with whether or not you wanted to approve something like this, I think it was important that you get that expert opinion and assessment before making such an important decision, because it does have an impact not only on your property, but on, you know, the entire road and the beauty of a very special place in Madison, I think, a very scenic area. I would like to just ask before we close out the public comment, if there are any other specific issues or concerns people have with the town trees, just to make sure we've covered those appropriately. We have two hands. I know you, did you want to make one more comment, or?
I just wanted to say that, sorry, Cynthia Horner, and you referred to this, and I think, you know, you mentioned it earlier. I think the town should get ahead of Eversource, and the minute you know something's gonna happen, and I don't know how to do this, but it could even be your listserv, telling people that Eversource is considering doing this kind of tree work along the street, so people get some information and don't just get some guy knocking on their door and saying, we need to cut some trees down in your front yard, and to incentivize your saying yes, because it's a hazard zone, we offer to cut down trees in your backyard, which is what I understand happened. And people just get free tree removal. And so I think it's important that the town alert people, and maybe, hopefully, the groups in the town can educate, can be somehow a part of the process, so people make better decisions. Whatever they do, at least they have more information, which isn't only dependent on Eversource.
Yeah. No, I appreciate the comment, and I think that that was something that we conveyed to Eversource, that we need to be better informed about when they're gonna actually take these types of steps. And so that's been made clear to them, and the town, since learning that, has taken a number of steps to do that. And actually, we used a ring-fenced approach about the public hearing, so hopefully those who live in the neighborhood received a phone call. It's only as good as what we can get in our listservs. We have a system, we're only as good as what people are subscribed to and what we're allowed to do, and you have to have a landline, I think, the listserv that we have currently, so, you know, we're doing the best we can. We're also putting it through, we put it through my community updates, and I think, you know, learning from this, we're gonna have a better communication flow, hopefully both ways. So I appreciate the comment though, and thank you. And I know, Barbie, you wanted to make another final comment on the town trees?
Well, it's about the town itself and how it's handling this. In the plan of conservation and development, 60% of the respondents indicated that Madison should adopt regulations restricting the complete clear cutting of all trees from a single lot. In this case, Eversource is not clearing, but they're clearing all the way back to homes. And they're not targeting just sick trees. They are targeting all trees within the strike zone, which can be 80 to 100 feet, depending on the tree. In this plan of conservation, we voted on this. There's been nothing done about this particular item. And that could have slowed this down and given people time to think about it. So I'm very disturbed, because I was part of this plan. So shame on us.
Well, I would say that the new plan of conservation development is in the process, and one of the things that there should be action items and processes in terms of regulations the town can pass. There are things that can be done, but we just have to, as a community, come together and say that we want those regulations in place. That's gonna be delays at times for people who wanna take action. But it's already a consideration, and I think this process has educated us so that next year, I encourage you to, you know, and our chair of the Conservation Commission toured as well, and so she was aware of this process earlier in the month. I think everybody learned from this, and hopefully we can maybe come up with some guidelines or regulations or notifications or things like that that the town can require for any types of programs like this going forward. So, any other public comment then?
One question I did get, I was trying to chime in earlier, was just the 3.2 thousand folks that are on this circuit. Is there a map of what that kind of, who are the affected people and where that circuit? I understand the River Road component of it, but
yeah,
I guess I'm not as informed. I don't think it shows the complete map.
The other presentation did, I think it showed it going up through Clinton and.
So I think that would be useful to the public, just to make sure that we're showcasing that.
So the other map was a section of the circuit map. They didn't show all the downstream customers and all the downstream areas. That is something.
Yeah, I think that would be helpful for people to do. And I know that work has already been conducted in Clinton, and I think that was another reason that people were a little alarmed, because of some decisions specific property owners took, in terms of allowing some clear cutting. That raised some alarm bells too with this. That was out of Clinton though, not in Madison, so. Any board member comments at this point? No? Noreen, any?
There was a comment. We place a moratorium on this massive cutting project in the road of Paulus here.
I think in terms of the town trees, I think that, our tree warden has done a great job in evaluating and kind of limiting it to what he thought was the most essential to be done. So we've really, like I said, we went from 80 trees to 20, and some of those are diseased trees that needed to be removed anyways because they were hazards. In terms of putting a stoppage to the project, I guess, I don't think there's any action our board can take to do that. This is a discussion between private property owners and the utility company. So, we don't issue a permit for this. Any thoughts from the board?
No, the Eversource's authority to do this really is driven from PURA, right? It's a state authority. Right. And our ability to stand in its way is pretty limited, if non-existent, right?
Oh.
So I think what we can do is be a cooperative partner with Eversource on the town property, right? The homeowners have the right to negotiate with Eversource as they see fit. The town property, I think, in us targeting known disease trees and cutting back a much bigger number down is evidence that we've worked cooperatively and in the best interest of Madison utility customers as well as those serviced. I'm going to be anxious to see how effective this program really is at impacting the service rates, not the cost of service, but the uptime that you guys experience, because it will serve as a model moving forward. And if we could proactively go down other streets and identify the disease trees for you guys to come out and cut down, that would be good too.
Peggy, may I just add, this is Noreen Bocaruda. When we had the hurricane, Irene, it was the one before Sandy, and Madison really got a lot of damage. And I recall, as Al does, a meeting, it was run by Eversource, and we were in an auditorium. It might have been the cafeteria big room in the new high school. People were angry. And I recall the presenter that night happened to be a Madison resident who worked for Eversource. And it was loud and clear, the message that night from across the board town people that that Eversource had not been doing its job. And one of the things, that really pushed that they've got to get on it. And these dead trees, I shouldn't say dead trees, I don't recall that, but these trees, there has to be a plan. And at the time, one of my sons worked for Eversource, and I remember talking to him about it. And he said, Mom, when you drive up 79, do you notice the wires and everything above? I said, no. He goes, you will. He said, I know people are upset, but he goes, we've got to be careful what we're wishing for here. And I think that's what's happened over the years. Eversource, really took a hit as far as criticism and insure penalties for that storm. And I think this is the outcome of it. We all know we can do better now. And this is a sort of a plan on steroids to some people. But I think we were demanding this. Townspeople were demanding this back after Irene. So I think we've got to get our ducks in a row. And I think Bruce had some good suggestions and things that we've got to really start looking at for people. But I'll tell you, that night, the message was loud and clear. Eversource was to get back together and do something about the trees in Madison.
Listen, there's an artful balance, I think, as Al said, relative to being proactive
and just waiting and seeing what happens. So, I guess to some extent applaud Eversource for being proactive. The flip side of that argument is it sounds like we're learning through this process that maybe communication could have been better, smoother with the town and the residents. And hopefully we're all learning some lessons along the way here to make it better, so.
I think yes, we'll take our last public comment, because we have a board meeting actually that starts at 7, so.
It's after 7, right?
As a resident along River Road, I feel like we're the sitting ducks in terms of with the experiment. And in terms of what Mr. Goldberg said about balance, 200 trees are being looked at on private property to be taken down. And I think to allow the homeowners to take advantage of Eversource's incentive to take them down, I would rather see Eversource be limited as to how much they could do, so that people would be less tempted to take them down. And, we say we've learned as we move forward to do something different, but right now, River Road it's an historic road. We have 2 old farms that were on that road. It's a shame that we're the experiment.
Thank you for your comment. I think one thing that we can do is try to reach residents again. Because these are your neighbors that are making these decisions, that they can get additional input from a tree expert before they make a final decision on a tree that they're concerned about. I think everybody agrees if a tree is diseased and is going to fall down eventually, which I think a lot of us have those on our property, of course you're going to take advantage of that, right? But it's those ones that aren't necessarily at that level, we want to make sure that those are the ones that stay. And I do think that having residents think about that, and I think the best thing that you can do as neighbors is talk to those people and make sure they understand, that this has a bigger impact on the neighborhood. And also some things that, Craig had mentioned to me too, is you're taking away shade tree. So what's gonna happen in the summer now? Your energy costs are gonna go higher because you're losing a shade tree. You're using something that does provide value to you as a homeowner also. So I think, reaching out, making sure your neighbors have the appropriate information to make educated decisions is an important thing that you as neighbors can play in that role. But ultimately, it is their decision. And
So just a point of order, if we want to continue this discussion, I would recommend we convene the Board of Selectmen meeting and then put it in recess or this, I'm sure that we can adjourn it temporarily.
Yeah, you'll adjourn back.
And then come back to the hearing and then go back, just because we've got a notice meeting at 7 o'clock and we're past the deadline.
We do, and I feel like everybody's had an opportunity to share their comment at this point, but I would say if you do have additional public comment, what you can do is email it to the BOS at madisonct.org. We'll add it to the record, anything that's emailed tonight or is typed into the chat. And you have ways to contact us, you have the Eversource information. So I think at that, we can probably call a close to the public hearing. So with that, I guess we will close the public hearing. And thank you so much for being here, and hopefully it won't be 300 or 200 trees, it'll be somewhat less than that. So that's what we're hoping for, but all right, thank you. Now I gotta do